Abandoned and betrayed. The planet Zorath 9 stretched out like a graveyard under a sky of swirling green and black. Sharp rocks stabbed up from the ground, and the air hissed with poison. A broken spaceship sat in the dirt, smoke curling from its cracked hull. Near it, a man lay still, his body crumpled like a thrown-away toy. His name was Captain Jace Harrow. Blood stained his torn suit, and his helmet, split down the middle, showed a faint reflection of the chaos above. He wasn't moving. Not yet. High in the sky, a sleek alien ship hovered. Its engines hummed, low and cruel, as it rose higher. The Clitherans were inside, tall, lizard-like creatures with scales that shimmered like wet metal and eyes that glowed cold yellow. They had left Jace here to die. To them, he was nothing, just a human, weak, useless. The ship tilted, then shot away, vanishing into the toxic clouds. They didn't look back. Jace's chest barely moved. A thin breath pushed through his cracked lips. The wind howled around him, kicking up dust that stung his skin. Zorath 9 was no place for life. The air burned lungs. The ground shook with hidden dangers. Most who landed here didn't last an hour. The Clitherans knew that. It's why they dumped him here like trash. They thought his story was over. But stories don't end so easily, not for humans. A shadow moved in the distance, something big, something alive. The ground rumbled, a low growl that made the rocks tremble. Jace's gloved hand twitched. His fingers curled, slow and weak, grabbing at the dirt. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't alone anymore. The shadow grew closer. It had legs, too many to count, and a shape that didn't fit anything human eyes were meant to see. Red eyes glowed through the haze, sharp and hungry. A roar ripped through the air, deep and angry, shaking Jace's bones, even as he lay there, half dead. Back before this moment, Jace had trusted the Clitherans. He was a soldier once, tough and scarred, with a jaw like iron and hands that knew how to fight. Now he worked for hire, leading a small crew of humans on dangerous jobs across the stars. The Clitherans came to him with a deal. Join them on Zorath 9 to pull rare minerals from the ground. They promised good pay. They promised safety. Jace believed them because he had no choice. His crew needed the money. He needed it too. But the Clitherans lied. They always did. Their smooth voices hid sharp teeth, and their promises were traps. Jace didn't see it until it was too late. His crew was dead now, cut down by Clitheran blades in a fight that came out of nowhere. Jace had fought back hard. He punched and shot, and yelled until his gun ran dry and his fists bled. It wasn't enough. The Clitheran leader, Virak, stood over him, his long tail flicking like a whip. "Humans break too easy," Virak had said, his voice like a hiss. Then he drove a claw into Jace's side and left him to the planet's mercy. Now that mercy was running out. The shadow stopped moving. It loomed over Jace, huge and silent. Hot breath steamed from its jagged mouth, washing over his face. He didn't open his eyes. Not yet. Maybe he couldn't. The thing tilted its head, studying him. It was no ordinary beast. Zorath 9 bred monsters, but this one was different. Bigger, smarter. Its claws clicked against the stone, each step a warning. It could kill him in a heartbeat, rip him apart and leave nothing behind. But it didn't. The air grew heavier. Jace's hand tightened in the dirt. A tiny spark of life flickered in him. Small, but stubborn. Humans didn't give up. Not like this. The creature let out a sound, low and rumbling, almost like a question. Jace's eyes cracked open, just a slit. He saw those red eyes staring back, close enough to feel their heat. Pain burned through his body, but something else burned too. Anger. The Clitherans had taken everything. His crew, his trust, his chance to get out alive. They thought he was done. They were wrong. The ground shook again. Another roar, louder this time. Jace coughed, blood on his lips, and forced himself to move. He didn't know what this thing was. He didn't know why it hadn't killed him. But one thing was clear. He wasn't dead yet. And if he wasn't dead, he'd make them pay. The creature stepped closer, its shadow swallowing him whole. This wasn't the end. This was the start. The Clitheran betrayal. The first sign of trouble wasn't a scream or a shot. It was the smell. 2 days before Jace Harrow lay bleeding on Zoreth 9, he stood inside a dark cave, his boots crunching on brittle stone. The air stank like rot and metal, sharp enough to sting his nose. His crew wrinkled their faces, muttering about it. "Smells like death," one said. Jace didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on his plasma rifle and kept moving. The Clitherans had promised this cave held treasure, rare minerals to make them all rich. But that smell, it wasn't right. It clung to everything, heavy and wrong, like a warning no one wanted to hear. Jace led his team deeper. 5 humans, tough and tired, followed him through the shadows. Their lights flickered on the walls, catching glints of something shiny. Minerals, maybe, or something else. Ahead, the Clitherans moved like ghosts. Tall, thin figures with scales that shimmered green and gold. Their tails swayed slow and smooth, and their yellow eyes glowed in the dark. They didn't talk much. They never did. Virak, their leader, walked at the front, his claws clicking on the ground. He'd hired Jace for this job, called him useful. Jace didn't trust him, but the pay was good. He needed it. His crew needed it. The cave opened into a wide chamber. Strange machines hummed along the walls, tall, twisted things that pulsed with blue light. Jace stopped. This wasn't a mining rig. His crew spread out, uneasy. "Where's the mineral haul?" asked Tara, his second in command, her voice sharp. Virak turned, slow and deliberate, his lips peeling back to show jagged teeth. "Patience," he hissed. "You'll see." But Jace saw something else. A crate in the corner, leaking a thin silver mist. That smell, rot and metal, poured from it, stronger now. His gut twisted. This wasn't about minerals. He stepped closer to the crate, his light shining on it. Tiny scratches marked the lid, like something had clawed its way out, or tried to. "What's this?" he asked, loud enough for Virak to hear. The Clitheran's eyes narrowed. "Nothing for you," he said, his voice cold. Jace didn't back off. He'd fought too many battles to let a bad feeling slide. "We're here for a job," he said. "Not secrets." Virak laughed, a dry, scraping sound. Humans ask too many questions. That's when it went wrong. Fast. A Clitheran near Tara moved, quick as a snake, and drove a blade into her chest. She gasped, then fell, blood pooling under her. Jace spun, shouting, but the others were already moving. His crew fought back. Plasma shots lit up the cave, cracking against scales. Jace fired 2, hitting one Clitheran in the arm. It screeched and lunged at him, claws slashing. He ducked, rolling across the stone, but the numbers were bad. 5 humans against 10 Clitherans. His team dropped one by one. Sliced, stabbed, torn apart. Jace yelled their names, his voice raw, but the cave swallowed the sound. Virak watched it all, calm and still. When only Jace was left, panting and bloody, the Clitheran stepped forward. "You're strong," he said, almost curious. "For a human." Jace glared, his rifle empty, his fists clenched. "What's in the crate?" he demanded. Virak's tail flicked. "A weapon," he said. "Not your concern." Then he struck. Claws raked across Jace's side, tearing through his suit. Pain exploded, white-hot. Jace stumbled, swinging a punch that caught Virak's jaw. The Clitheran hissed, but didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed Jace by the throat and lifted him like a rag doll. "You're done," Virak said, tossing him to the ground. Jace hit hard, air rushing out of him. The Clitherans dragged him outside, into the toxic wind of Zoreth 9. They dumped him there, next to the wrecked ship, and walked away. Varek's voice floated back. Let the planet finish him. The alien ship roared to life, lifting off, leaving Jace in the dirt. Blood seeped from his side. His vision blurred. That smell, rot and metal, still lingered in his mind, mixing with the pain. Then the ground shook, not from the ship, something else, something big. Jace's hand twitched, clawing at the dirt. He didn't hear the roar yet, not with his ears, but he felt it, deep in his chest. The Clitherans thought he was dead. They didn't know what was coming. Neither did he. Meeting the monster. A sound woke Jace Harrow, not a roar, not a scream, but a low, wet clicking, like bones tapping together in the dark. He lay on the jagged ground of Zoreth 9, his body broken and cold. Blood soaked his torn suit, pooling under him. The Clitherans had left him here to die, their ship long gone into the swirling green sky. His chest barely rose. Pain clawed at him, sharp and deep, but that sound, click, 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 cut through the fog in his head. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the planet. It was close. Too close. His eyes fluttered open, sticky with dust and blood. The world spun, blurry and green. The clicking stopped. Silence pressed down, heavy and thick, until a hot breath washed over his face. It stank of sulfur and meat. Jace's heart thudded, weak but stubborn. He turned his head, slow, painful, and saw it. A shape loomed over him, bigger than a tank, its edges sharp and wrong. Red eyes glowed like coals, staring down. The Zorethian apex wasn't just a beast. It was a nightmare carved from the planet's guts. Legs like spears, a body like armor, claws that gleamed black and wet. It tilted its head, and the clicking started again, louder, from deep in its throat. Jace's hand fumbled for his plasma rifle. It lay a few feet away, cracked and useless. He tried to move, dragging himself an inch before his strength gave out. The apex stepped closer, its claws sinking into the dirt. Each step shook the ground, rattling Jace's teeth. He braced himself. This was it, torn apart by a monster after the Clitherans left him for dead. But the beast didn't strike. It stopped, towering over him, and dropped something at his feet. A thud. Jace squinted. It was a Clitheran soldier, dead, its scales crushed, its yellow eyes dull. The apex nudged it with a claw, almost gentle, then looked at Jace again. He froze. His mind raced, fighting the pain. This thing had killed a Clitheran, one of the ones who betrayed him. Was it hunting them, or was it testing him? The apex lowered its head, close enough that Jace felt the heat of its breath. Those red eyes didn't blink. They studied him, sharp and alive with something he couldn't name. Not hunger, not rage. Something smarter. Jace coughed, blood on his lips, and forced words out. You hate them too, His voice was a rasp, barely there, but the apex twitched, like it understood. He pushed himself up, slow and shaky, leaning on one arm. The world tilted, but he didn't fall. The apex watched, still as stone. Jace's side burned where Varek's claw had cut him. His crew was gone, slaughtered in that cave with the leaking crate and the smell of death. The Clitherans thought he'd rot here. Maybe he should have, but humans didn't break that easy. Not him. Not now. He met the apex's gaze, his jaw tight. They left us both, he said, louder this time. You and me, we're not done. The apex let out a sound, not a roar, but a rumble, low and deep, vibrating through the dirt. It stepped back, dragging the dead Clitheran with it. Jace watched, his breath short. The beast ripped into the corpse, tearing scales and flesh, but its eyes stayed on him. A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't just a killer. It was choosing him. Why? He didn't know. He grabbed a rock, steadying himself, and forced his legs under him. They shook, but they held. The apex stopped eating. It dropped the mangled body and waited. Jace took a step. Pain stabbed him, but he gritted his teeth. Another step. The apex matched him, moving slow, its claws clicking again. He didn't know if it was friend or enemy. Maybe neither. But one thing burned clear in his mind. The Clitherans were still out there. Virak was still out there. And whatever that crate held, that weapon, it wasn't finished with him yet. He looked at the apex, its red eyes locked on his. "You want revenge?" he asked, his voice hard. "So do I." The ground trembled. A shadow moved in the distance, something else alive on this Hellvole planet. Jace didn't flinch. Neither did the apex. They stood there, man and monster, tied by blood and betrayal. The clicking started again, steady and sure, like a heartbeat. An unlikely alliance. A faint blue glow pulsed on Jace Harrow's hand, tracing a jagged scar he didn't remember getting. He sat in the shadow of a wrecked Clitheran scout ship on Zorath 9, his back against a twisted metal wall. The toxic wind howled outside, but that glow, soft, strange, alive, held his attention. It had started an hour ago, after the Zorathian apex saved him from death. The monster loomed nearby, its massive body curled around a pile of scrap, red eyes half closed but watching. Jace flexed his fingers. The scar didn't hurt. It felt warm, like a secret waking up inside him. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing. This beast wasn't leaving him. Hours earlier, Jace had been a dead man, left bleeding by the Clitherans, betrayed and broken. The apex could have finished him. Instead, it dropped a mangled Clitheran at his feet, like a gift. Now, they were here, two survivors on a planet that wanted them gone. Jace wiped blood from his face and studied the creature. Its hide was thick, like steel plates, and its claws gleamed black in the dim light. But those eyes, sharp, alive, told him it wasn't just a killer. It had a mind, a purpose, and somehow it had picked him. He named it Reaver. The word came easy, watching it tear apart the scout ship's wreckage with its jaws. Bits of metal and wire scattered around them, and Reaver chewed through it like a dog with a bone. Jace smirked, weak but alive. "You like junk, huh?" he said. Reaver's head tilted, a low rumble rolling from its chest. Jace didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. He'd fought worse. And now, maybe, he had something better. His gear was trashed, plasma rifle dead, suit ripped, but his hands still worked. He crawled to the wreckage, digging through it. Reaver watched, curious, as Jace pulled out a coil of wire and a busted thruster. His crew used to call him a fixer. "Give Jace a stick and a rock. He'll build you a cannon," Tara had said once. She was gone now, cut down by Virak's claws. The thought stung, but Jace pushed it down. He had work to do. With shaky fingers, he twisted the wire into a loop and tied it around the thruster. Reaver's head swung close, sniffing the mess. "Back off," Jace muttered. Reaver snorted but stayed put. He kept going. Hours passed. Maybe more, he couldn't tell. The toxic sky never changed, just churned green and black. Jace rigged the thruster to a strip of metal, shaping it into a crude harness. Reaver's size was a weapon, but Jace could make it sharper. He stood, legs wobbly, and held up the harness. "Come here," he said, firm. Reaver's eyes narrowed, but it lumbered over, claws clicking on the stone. Jace strapped the harness around its neck, the thruster humming faint and blue. It fit, barely. Reaver shook its head, testing it, then growled low. Jace grinned. "Good boy." The bond grew from there. Jace tossed scraps of Clitheran armor from the wreck. Reaver caught them midair, crunching them down. "Fetch," Jace said, and Reaver obeyed, faster each time. It wasn't just tricks. It was trust. Jace leaned against the wall, catching his breath. That glowing scar pulsed again, brighter now, matching the hum of the harness. He frowned. Something connected them, him and Reaver. Maybe the planet, maybe the Clitheron's weapon. He didn't know yet, but he felt it. Then he heard it, a distant whine, sharp and mechanical. Clitheron engines. They were still here, somewhere on Zoreth 9. Jace's jaw tightened. Virak was out there, thinking he'd won, thinking Jace was dead. Reaver's head snapped up, ears twitching. It hurt it too. Jace grabbed a jagged piece of metal, a makeshift blade, and stood. Pain burned in his side, but anger burned hotter. "They're not done," he said, looking at Reaver. The beast rumbled, its claws flexing. "Neither are we." The glow on his hand flared, bright and steady. Reaver's eyes locked on his, red meeting blue. Man and monster, tied by something neither understood. The Clitherons had left them both to die. Now, they'd learn what that mistake cost. Jace took a step, Reaver at his side. The whine grew louder. Time was up. Turning the tables. A swarm of glowing insects erupted from the cracks of Zoreth 9's jagged ground, their tiny wings buzzing like a scream. Jace Harrow froze, his scared hand pulsing blue under the torn glove. The light flared brighter than ever, and the bugs, each no bigger than a coin, swirled around it, drawn like moths to a flame. He cursed under his breath, shaking his arm, but they clung tighter, their needle-sharp legs pricking his skin. Reaver, the Zorethian apex, snarled beside him, snapping its jaws at the swarm. The air crackled with their hum, loud enough to drown out the toxic wind. Jace didn't know why his scar called them, but he knew one thing. The Clitherons were close, and this noise would bring them running. He crouched behind a slab of rock, Reaver hulking at his side. The harness he'd rigged, scrap metal and a humming thruster, glowed faint on the beast's neck. They'd been tracking the Clitherons for hours, following the faint whine of engines through the wasteland. Jace's side ached, his suit barely holding together, but his grip on the jagged metal blade was steady. Revenge kept him moving. The Clitherons thought he was dead. Virak thought he'd won. Now, Jace and Reaver would show them what humans and monsters could do. The swarm thinned, spiraling into the sky, their glow marking his spot like a beacon. "Great," Jace muttered. Reaver's red eyes flicked to him, then to the horizon. A Clitheron patrol ship hovered low, its sleek shape cutting through the green haze. Jace ducked lower, his heart pounding. 3 soldiers dropped from the ship, tall, scaled, their claws glinting. They moved fast, scanning the ground, their voices hissing through comms. They hadn't seen him yet, but they would. "Ready?" Jace whispered. Reaver's claws flexed, a low rumble in its throat. He tapped the thruster on its harness, and it whined to life, blue light flaring. "Go." Reaver launched forward, a blur of muscle and steel, crashing into the first Clitheron before it could react. Claws tore through scales, blood spraying green. The second soldier spun, firing a plasma burst. Jace rolled out, blade raised, and slashed its leg. It screeched, stumbling, and Reaver finished it with a snap of its jaws. The third ran, shouting into its comm. Jace threw his blade, crude but sharp, and it sank into the Clitheron's back. Silence fell, broken only by Reaver's growl. Jace retrieved his weapon, wiping green blood off his hands. The scar glowed again, dimmer now, the bugs gone. He didn't have time to wonder why. The patrol's comm crackled. Virak's voice, cold and sharp. "Report." No answer. Jace smirked. "They're scared now," he said to Reaver. The beast snorted, nudging a dead soldier with its claw. Jace climbed onto its back, gripping the harness. "Let's find the rest." They moved fast, Reaver's legs pounding the dirt. The Clitheron outpost loomed ahead, a cluster of metal towers, lights blinking in the haze. Jace spotted guards on the walls, their rifles glinting. He tapped Reaver's side, steering it into a shallow trench. "Quiet," he said. Reaver obeyed, crouching low. Jace peeked out. The outpost buzzed with movement, soldiers loading crates, ships prepping to lift off. One crate leaked silver mist, just like the cave. The bioweapon. His jaw tightened. They weren't just leaving. They were planning something worse. A siren wailed. The patrol's silence had tipped them off. Jace cursed. No more hiding. He slapped the thruster, and Reaver roared, charging from the trench. Guards fired, plasma bolts sizzling past. Reaver tanked the hits, its hide sparking but holding. Jace leaped off, rolling behind a crate as Reaver smashed into the wall. Stone cracked, soldiers screamed. Jace grabbed a fallen rifle, half-charged, and shot back, dropping 2 Clitherans. Reaver tore through the rest, a storm of claws and teeth. Then the ground shook, not from Reaver. A tower hummed, silver mist pouring out. Jace's scar burned, the glow flaring wild. The mist swirled, forming a cloud of tiny machines. Nanites, alive and hungry. Varric's voice boomed over a speaker. "Run, human. It's too late." The nanites rushed forward, dissolving rock, metal, everything. Jace yelled, "Reaver, move." They bolted, the swarm at their heels, barely escaping as the outpost crumbled behind them. Jace panted, Reaver snarling beside him. The hunt wasn't over. Virak had played his card. Now it was Jace's turn, man and monster versus machine. A scream tore through Jace Harrow's mind, not his own, but Terra's, sharp and fading. His scared hand burned blue, the glow pulsing wild as he crouched in the shadow of Zoreth 9's crumbling outpost. For a split second he saw her, his second in command, standing in the cave, blood dripping from her chest. Her eyes locked on his. "Finish it," she whispered, then vanished. Jace blinked hard, his breath ragged. The vision wasn't real, but the scar made it feel like it was. Reaver growled beside him, its red eyes darting to his hand. The Zorethian apex sensed it too. Something tied them to this fight, deeper than revenge. The Clitheran's nanite swarm buzzed in the distance, eating everything it touched. Time was running out. Jace gripped the EMP he'd rigged from scavenged tech, a clunky mess of wires and a power core, but it could stop the nanites. He'd seen the crate in the cave, leaking that silver mist. Varric's bioweapon wasn't just a weapon, it was a plague, built to wipe out worlds. If it left Zoreth 9, Reaver's kind would die too. Jace wouldn't let that happen. He slapped the harness on Reaver's neck, the thruster humming. "We hit the ship," he said, voice hard. Reaver rumbled, claws flexing. They charge. The Clitheran base loomed ahead, a tangle of towers and landing pads. The nanites swirled behind them, a silver storm dissolving stone and metal. Reaver barreled through the outer guards, its hide sparking under plasma fire. Jace clung to its back, firing a stolen rifle one-handed. Shots cracked off scales. 2 soldiers dropped, green blood pooling. Reaver smashed a gate, metal screaming as it bent. The ship sat dead center, engines warming up, Virak's sleek command craft. Jace leaped off, rolling behind a crate. "Keep them busy," he yelled. Reaver roared, tearing into a squad, claws slashing. Jace sprinted for the ship, EMP clutched tight. Guards blocked the ramp, 3 Clitherans, tails whipping. He ducked a claw, slammed his rifle's butt into one's jaw, and shot the second. The third lunged, pinning him. Pain flared in his side, old wounds ripping open. Then Reaver crashed through, jaws clamping the soldier's neck. It screeched and went limp. Jace nodded, breathless. Good timing. Inside, the ship hummed, lights flickering. Jace moved fast, boots pounding metal. Varric's voice crackled over the comms, mocking. "You're a pest, human. You and your pet." Jace smirked, weaving through corridors. "Then why are you running?" He found the core, a glowing column pulsing with power. The nanite's control hub. He jammed the EMP into a slot, twisting wires. It sparked, alive but unstable. Footsteps echoed. Virak, tall and cold, stepped into view, claws gleaming. "You're too late," Virak hissed, tail lashing. "The swarm's free." Jace stood, scar glowing brighter. "Not yet." Virak charged, faster than Jace expected. A claw slashed his arm. Blood sprayed, but Jace ducked the next, slamming his fists into Virak's chest. Scales cracked. Virak snarled, grabbing Jace's throat, lifting him. "Weak," he spat. Jace choked, vision blurring. Tara's scream echoed again, sharp in his head. His scar flared, blue light blinding. Virak flinched, loosening his grip. Jace kicked free, gasping, and dove for the EMP. The ship shook. Reavers roar outside, metal tearing. Virak lunged again, claws raking Jace's back. He yelled, pain white-hot, but rolled, slamming the EMP switch. It whined, high and sharp. Virak grabbed him, pinning him to the floor. "You lose," he hissed, teeth bared. Then the hull exploded inward. Reaver, massive and furious, crashed through. Its claws sank into Virak, hurling him back. Jace scrambled up, blood dripping, and hit the EMP again. A pulse ripped out. Lights died, the core flickered, and Virak screamed as his comms went silent. The nanites outside froze, dropping like dead flies. Jace leaned on Reaver, breathing hard. Virak twitched, pinned under rubble, his yellow eyes dimming. "Impossible," he rasped. Jace stared down, scars still glowing. "Humans don't quit." Reaver snapped its jaws, ending it. The ship groaned, collapsing. Jace stumbled out, Reaver at his side, the nanite storm gone. The outpost was ruins now, silent under the toxic sky. They'd won, for Tara, for the crew, for every human the Clitherans underestimated. A new legend begins. A low, eerie song drifted over the shattered ruins of the Clitheran outpost, carried by the toxic wind of Zoreth 9. It wasn't human. Too deep, too strange. Like a chorus of shadows humming through the rocks. Jace Harrow stood amidst the wreckage, his scarred hand glowing faint blue, the sound tugging at something inside him. He tilted his head, listening. Reaver, the Zorethian apex, shifted beside him, its massive claws scraping the dirt. The beast's red eyes scanned the horizon, ears twitching. The song wasn't theirs, but it felt like a salute, a call from the unseen things that lived in this hellhole, marking the end of the fight. The Clitherans were gone. Jace and Reaver had made sure of that. The outpost lay in pieces. Towers crumpled, ships broken, the silver nanite swarm dead on the ground like ash. Jace's suit hung in tatters, blood staining his side, but he stood tall. The EMP had worked, its pulse killing the bioweapon and Virak's plans. The Clitheran leader's body was somewhere under the rubble, his smug voice silenced forever. Jace wiped his face, smearing dirt and blood, and looked at Reaver. The beast rumbled, nudging him with its snout. "We did it," Jace said, his voice rough but steady. Reaver's tail flicked, a rare sign of calm. He remembered the start, left for dead, betrayed by Virak, his crew slaughtered. The Clitherans had called him weak, a pest, a human not worth keeping alive. Now their base was dust, and Jace walked free, a monster at his side. That glowing scar pulsed once, then dimmed, its blue light fading into his skin. He didn't know what it was, something from the planet, maybe, or the nanite's touch, but it had kept him going. It tied him to Reaver, to this place. He flexed his hand, feeling the strength still there. Humans didn't just survive. They fought back. The song grew louder, echoing off the jagged cliffs. Jace squinted into the haze. Shapes moved, small, quick, too far to see clear. More of Reaver's kind. Something else. They didn't come closer, just watched, their voices weaving through the air. Reaver let out a low growl, not angry but proud. Jace smirked. Guess we got an audience. He patted Reaver's side, the harness still humming faint from their last fight. The beast had torn through the Clitherans like a storm, and Jace had guided it, turning raw power into something unstoppable. Together, they were more than the aliens ever expected. He scavenged what he could: a cracked rifle, a chunk of Clitheran tech, a comm device spitting static. The comm crackled to life, faint voices cutting through. Not Clitheran, human. A salvage crew, maybe, picking up the EMP's echo. Jace listened, his jaw tightening. Word would spread soon. A human, left for dead, had taken down a Clitheran base with a Zorathian apex as his ally. The galaxy would hear it. Traitors, soldiers, aliens who thought humans were soft. They'd whisper his name, and Reaver's too. A legend was born here, bloody and raw. Jace turned to the horizon. The toxic sky churned, green and black, but it didn't scare him anymore. He'd beaten this planet, beaten Virac, beaten the odds. Reaver stepped forward, its massive frame casting a long shadow. You ready? Jace asked. The beast snorted, claws digging in. They weren't done. Not with the Clitherans, not with whatever else waited out there. The song faded, the unseen singers slipping back into the dark. Jace felt their eyes linger, a quiet respect. He'd earned it. He walked, Reaver at his side, the ground crunching under them. The comm buzzed again. Human voices. Closer now. Unknown signal. Zorath 9. Who's out there? Jace didn't answer yet. Let them wonder. Let them come find the wreckage, the bodies, the story carved into this wasteland. He'd talk when he was ready. For now, he had Reaver, a blade, and a fire that wouldn't die. The Clitherans had left him for dead. He'd come back a king, a monster his crown. The wind howled, carrying the last notes of that strange song. Jace glanced at Reaver, then ahead. Next fight's waiting, he said. Reaver rumbled, red eyes gleaming. They'd moved into the haze, two shadows against the storm, ready for whatever came. The galaxy wouldn't forget them.